Hey everyone, you're watching the Inside Out BIM, and today we're continuing our series on Revit API, in this case having a look at selection filter. If you haven't watched the previous parts, make sure to do that. Before getting started, if you find the content useful, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. So I would like to get started with demonstrating you what we're going to create. So as you can see, I simply call a method pick elements on my UI document instance, and I'm just going to show how many elements have I selected. So as you can see here, I can specify which criteria my element should pass and what selection option I would like to have. So right now I'm saying that I want to select walls, and let's say that I want to select them from the current document. So I'm going to run this. Actually, I'm going to compile the code. I'm going to go to Revit. And now, as you can see here, I have some elements that were created in the current document, and I have a link. So now I'm going to run this. Oops. I'm going to run this. That is the test command. And now I can select all walls that are located in the current document. And now it will show me that we have selected 5 elements. Right now, what we can do is that, let's say eventually in your other plugin, you decided that now you would like to not select a wall, but for example, a family instance. So you can easily just change here. So we are making sure that it's open for extensibility. So even here you can use it, and you are the one who decides what elements should pass the criteria. So right now I want to select only elements that are family instances. So I'm going to go task command. I'm going to go like this, and that selects like my furniture, my doors, my windows, because all of them are family instances. Now, if I decided to say that, you know what, I want to uh, have some different criteria, maybe by category. Now I can say category ID equals new element ID, and I can say, let's give me the category of doors. And now it will select only elements of door category. So if I go back, run this command again. So I'm doing this from the add-in manager. Make sure to watch previous videos. So now it selects only doors. So as you can see how extensible it is. So now we can easily change what we would like to select without going and creating an extra class for this. Because usually what I see people doing is that they have like room selection filter, then they have door selection filter, when they have like tons of different filters for each element. But here we're actually making that extensible. So let's go back where we had like element is wall, for example. And now I'm going to have not from the current document, but now I'm going to say from the link document. So now I'm going to say that select walls from the link document. So that we shouldn't be able to select these doors, but we should be able to select these ones. So let's try that one out. As you can see, it will select only walls from linked document, and it shows that there are 9 of them. Also, we have an option to then maybe in your project you decided that you need to select from both, and you go create both document option right now. There's one drawback of this, that we cannot do this cross selection, so we cannot actually draw this rectangle, but we just need to selectively go like this and pick each element, right? So now if I go finish, it's going to tell me that I have selected 5 elements. So now we can easily change and say, you know, we select from both. And now it's again extensible, because we can say that I want to select from both documents elements that are family instance, right? And now I'm going to be able to select these furnitures from the linked document from the link document, right, I can select them and I can select these ones as well, right? Doors, these window, right? So as you can see that is very extensible. So now I can go like this, select, go finish, and that'll tell me that I've selected 3 elements. So actually, as you can see, not only will we create like some cool functions related to Revit API, but we will also cover a lot of cool things about programming. So in addition to selection filter, we'll cover a bit of solid principles, delegates, extension methods, abstract classes, and interfaces. So stay tuned. So here we are in our core Revit module solution, and actually we have the same name for the project. Usually I would say that that is not a good practice, but right now it's not that important. Right now we're covering Revit API and all of this cool features. Eventually we will refactor this a bit. So before even getting started with selection and all of that stuff, let's kind of analyze what we have in Revit API, so how we can possibly prompt the user to select elements. So how we can say, now you should select elements. So let me go to the documentation. Actually, oops. So the first thing that you may think about is to go to the document class. Actually, here we are in the documentation. And if you kind of think about this, right, you go to Revit and think about it, how do we select elements? We have an opened document, right, and we can simply select that. And as simple as that, right? But how we can actually do this via API and what we would need to do. So the first thing you may think is to go to the document class. And when you search it, you may see like, we have the document creation, so we have like 2 document classes with the same name, and you may think like, how is that possible? So let's analyze what we have here. So the first class is located under Autodesk Revit Creation, right? So that is the namespace for this. And here it just tells the description. So the document creation object is used to create new instances of elements within the Autodesk Revit project. And that is actually not what we need. This element is responsible for creating new instances of elements. But if you go to the next document class, that is actually the document that represents an open Autodesk Revit project. So how that can be possible that we have the same names? That's because they're located in different namespaces. So names should be unique in a given namespace. But if they differentiate, that's okay. So if the namespaces kind of diverged, they differentiate, it's okay to have the same names. And but is we do we need a document class or maybe not? The main question that you need to ask yourself is that, but can be opened on a background, right? Think of the like any app that you use, for example, like Excel. We can use Excel in the background without opening this to the user interface. And can we select element in the Revit UI using a document that opened in the background? Of course not. So document, that is something that can be opened like in the UI or it can be opened in the background. So that is the reason why we have an iDocument class, right? iDocument class. So iDocument class, it actually represents an Autodesk Revit project opened, right, in the Revit user interface. So that is an open document in Revit UI. So that is the one that you actually opened, like this one. A document can be opened on background, so you won't be able to see this because it's on background. And if you go to the properties of this, you'll have a property called selection. And selection, that is something that is responsible for retrieving the currently selected elements in Revit. So let's go here and analyze. I hope you're not frustrated because of my mode, like black mode, because That's so my eyes don't get damaged. But just repeat what I'm doing and it's not going to be a big deal for you. So here we have a selection class. And let's kind of analyze here what methods do we have. Now we're not worried about, we're worrying only about methods that are starting with the word pick, because all these methods, they prompt the user to select something. So the ones that we're gonna really look at today, and other ones will be a piece of cake for you. Pick, this is one is called pick objects. Let's read what it can do. It prompts the user to select multiple objects. So in the UI, it will prompt to select elements. And here we have like a lot of overloads here. As you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 options how we can select, how we can use this method. And this is what is called overloads. And here, usually you, out of all of this, the most crucial part for you to understand is how to use ISelectionFilter. So here, you can analyze what it expects you to get. For example, object type specifies the type of object to be selected. If you didn't understand what it is, you simply go to this and read up about this. So that is an enumeration. Okay, so the enumerated type contains object types allowed to be selected during selection operations. And here, as you can see, we can select elements, we can select edges, we can select faces. Because if you go to Revit and here we have some wall, the wall is just a geometry, just a solid. And your geometry consists of lines, curves, faces. So sometimes we want to select a face on the wall. Sometimes we want to select a point on the wall and stuff like that. So here we're just saying what we would like to select. But if you go back to our UI document, we can actually see that the second argument here is the ISelectionFilter, and that is an interface. If you're not familiar with interface, it's better to just kind of know just a bit about this. But the main idea, I'm gonna actually show you what it is, but for the time being, it's just telling us what our class should look like. So when we're implementing it, that will tell us what our class should look like. It may seem, if you have no idea about interfaces, it may have no sense to you what I've just told you, but bear with me. I'm gonna explain everything in just a minute. So here, if you go here, that is actually an interface. That is something that is responsible for what element are what elements are allowed to be selected and what references are allowed to be selected. So now I'm gonna go to Visual Studio and show you some examples so you can really understand it. So now I'm gonna open up my Visual Studio and here I'm gonna create it. So let's kind of just try to use it. For example, we go UI document, we go selection, and here we go peak objects. And here we have object type, and let's say we want to select element, but here we need to have ISelectionFilter. Interfaces is not something that you cannot create an instance of interface. Interface, that is something that we implement, that you should implement. So for the time being, I'm gonna comment this out, and I'm gonna go here and create a folder. So I'm gonna go add, and I'm gonna add a folder named extensions. Extensions. And let's copy this. Oops, not there. Let's actually, inside of this folder, create another folder, and I'm going to name this selection extensions. And inside of this, I'm clicking Control Shift A. You can do right click, add new item, and here you can add a class. And let's name this one element selection filter. Right now, in this document, in this kind of file, I'm going to create a lot of classes. You shouldn't be doing like this. I'm just showing you this so you can see everything in one place, but eventually, like in the end of the video, I'm going to fix it. So here, what we do is that we go double dot, these and we go ISelectionFilter. So we want to implement it. And now it kind of highlights in red. So it's telling us that you cannot use it like this. This class cannot exist without implementing what is required from interface. So I'm going to go here and it tells me implement missing members. And here I'm using ReSharper and it's going to create that for me. I can actually remove this once. So what it does, it actually, if you remember this from what we have in our documentation, that here it tells us what methods we have. Interface is not implementing these methods. We are the ones who tell what this method should look like. So here we're telling what criteria this element should pass. For example, I can go return element is wall, right? And here I'm also always going to return true for the time being. I'm going to explain it to you what that means. So here, as you can see, we're saying that if element is wall, it should be selected. Let's now create it here. So I'm going to go like this. And here I can use new element selection filter. There we go. And let's name this var references for the time being because this is what it returns. It returns references. I'm going to build this solution. So I'm clicking Control Shift B, or you can go to Build and click on Build Solution. Let's go to Revit. So now, and actually here I have this like linked files and some elements from the current document. I'm using Add-in Manager. I hope you kind of checked my previous videos when I told you how to set this up. So go Add-in Manager, go to Main, and just can cross select, and I'm picking elements and I'm picking walls actually. And what it does behind the scenes when you do this cross selection, it goes to each of the element and it asks, are you a wall, right? If you're a wall, I'm gonna select you. I will enable you to be selected. So you can go is floor right now, like, you can do here whatever you want and type here whatever you want. Like I'm gonna go with finish, and now I'm gonna call this again, and right now I'm gonna be able to select only floors. But if you remember from the demonstration, we wanted to make it like extensible, right? Because right now what happens here is that we actually, if I wanted to create a filter for walls and floors and different ones, I would need to create two different classes for this. That is not something that we would like to have. We want this to be extensible. So what we're doing here is that we're going to use a delegate. And if you're not familiar with delegates, you can check out my video about master links. In the first video, I actually explained everything you need to know, actually everything you need to know about this part that I'm going to cover today. So about delegates, about lambda expressions, but to put it simply, is just a reference to a method. So here, for example, here we can pass an element like here, but we can also pass another method. So what we can do, here we can create a constructor, right? And inside this constructor, we can use this delegate. I'm gonna use there is these things like func, action, and predicate, and behind the scenes there are a delegate that were created. So just developers for us created these things, so we don't need to create tons of delegates, so we don't need to have like tons of delegates. So here we can go func. Func, this is a type of delegate that have this is the type of delegate that has arguments and it also has a return type. So if you use an action, it will only have arguments, but it's gonna have void for return type. So what we type here is that I want to pass a method here, like that will have as an argument element, and the last here, so we can have like one element, we can have second element, and we can have bool. And what that means that the method for this will look like this. We'll have a method that will have one element, then we have another element, and this will return a boolean. Let me kind of delete it. So I want to have a method that will look, that will look like this. And actually, it's the that method looks the exact way the same as this one. And I'm gonna name this validate element. And here I can use Alt Enter and I can introduce read only field. I'm not going to use get only because I don't want other classes to access it. So here I have a read only field, and here I just say that this field, we're assigning this field, oops, this field to this value that we're passing here. And this is the place where we can go like that, validate element, and just pass this element. And right now, that is extensible because we are the one who decides what elements should be passed. Right now, it tells us that, you know what, we cannot create it because element selection filter has one parameter, but it's invoked with 0 arguments. So if we go Control Shift Space, you can see what you need to pass here, func. And let's go and create a method here, like public boolean is wall, and I'm gonna pass here element, and I'm gonna go like element, and I'm gonna just return element is wall, and I'm gonna pass it here is wall. Oops, is wall. As you can see, I'm not I'm not passing these parentheses here because if you're passing parentheses, that means that you want to call this method here. Here it's like I'm passing any other element to my classes, right? So now I'm just passing a reference to a method. So you really need to understand this. So we're passing a reference to a method, but we call this method here, right? So we actually call it here, but not here. Here we just passed it, but we call it inside of this method, right? So this is the place where we call it. So if I go right now to my Revit, it will select only walls. So I go main and I go cross selection, it will select only the walls. What I want to do right now is actually, but again, we don't want to um, like have tons of these methods that are just kind of not, uh, and we don't want to have tons of methods, right? That are just served, it just serves like a temporary purpose and we don't want to reuse it. So this is when lambda expressions can come into play. This is where lambda expressions are so useful. So what is the syntax for this? And you can go to Google and just type lambda expressions, C#, and you can read from the documentation, actually a lot of useful stuff. And here you just type like this. That is the syntax. And let me explain to you what happens. So here you go like this. On the left side, you have what elements should be passed. Actually, if you remember the method that was here, these are the arguments that we pass to the method, right? So we pass an element. And actually the compiler, it sees that that is an element right now. If you hover over this, I think for some reason it's not showing, but that should. It knows that that is an element because it kind of sees what we need to pass here. So on the left side, we have what we pass as arguments, and on the right side, like from this, on the right side, we say what we should return, and we should return Boolean. If I go like this, it's not gonna work because it's gonna tell me that, we cannot convert element to Boolean. So we can say is, let's go with floor right now, and I'm gonna run it. I'm going to compile this and I'm going to run it from here. Now we can select only the floor. As you can see how easy it is to do. So right now what I want to do is that now it's extensible, right? Because now you're the one who decides like whether I want to select floors, some other parts. You can go and say I want to go with the category ID, and that should equal to the new element ID of the built-in category, and that should be OST walls, for example, right? So you can easily do this way. What it wants one more parenthesis. So now it will select only the walls like this. Uh, so now it's actually extensible. Let me kind of go there and I'm gonna say just A is wall for the time being. What else do we have? So here, this part is extensible right now, but what about references? So actually, as I told you, our element, our wall, for example, it consists of points because its geometry consists of this. And we can actually control what should be selected. So let me show you a quick example of this. So for example here, I'm gonna say that I want to select, I have this option to select point on element. And here I can determine what kind of reference should be selected. So we can say element reference type should equal to the surface. I'm gonna show you right now what I did. So actually, if you go to documentation and read up about like about references, there we go. Like element refer like let's read up about reference. Here you can read what information it contains. So it contains like element ID, it contains like linked element ID, because again, what is a reference? Whenever you even create dimensions in Revit, right? You can create dimensions by points, by edges, right? So that is, and each edge, each kind of reference, and that is a reference. And that reference knows to what element ID it belongs to. So this is what you need to think of a reference. And right now, what we can do is that we can actually ask whether it's reference type, and reference type is actually telling us whether it's a surface, whether it's just a linear. So the reference is like curve or edge and all of this stuff. So here we can do like that. But again, what happens that we're kind of limiting and we're making this code like not extensible because we just told that, we should only select faces, right? We should only select faces, right? So we can only select faces. If you go and you want to change like the type, you need to go there and tell reference, let's go with linear. And right now, what you will do is that you go here, run this, and now you can select only like curves. What I want to show you right now is that, and actually, as you can see, that is also a problem. When you just create an element selection filter, it's not that big, like, it's not that, it's not that common that you'll use it that much, but you need to be really familiar with this. And we will use it right now with linked files. And I'm just showing you that how that works. But here, eventually, because if you want to select curves or something else, as you can see, you have a lot of object types, right? You can have like face, you can have edge. So you can actually determine what you would like to select. So here, I think it's going to be applicable with point and element. It can be quite applicable, but you can find out like where it's applicable for yourself. I'm just showing you what it is. So basically, it's going to go through reference, and reference is like its element has a lot of references like points, faces, and all of this stuff. So now I'm going to focus on element, but I also want to have an option to extend it. So here, I want to also pass like as we did here. But I don't want my user to always do this because, as I told you, it's not going to be used. It's a rare kind of scenario when I want to use it. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create an overload for this, right? So I'm going to have like an overload. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to create a constructor. And here I'm going to say I want to have this one. And I also want to have func of the reference. I'm going to pass as an argument one reference, and I'm going to return Boolean. And I'm going to name this validate reference. So now we have created an overload. So the instance of this class can be created by two ways. The first one is by putting this method, and the second one is by putting this one. And when I hover over this validate reference, I can click Alt Enter and I can introduce a read-only field. So again, the field will be introduced here, and here we will assign this value. But we need to also assign this one. So we actually need to do something like this. But that is a repetition. And we should actually stay compliant to dry to not repeat yourself. So dry stands for do not repeat yourself. And in this scenario, what we have an amazing thing is to call this. And what it does, it actually, if you have this part, it's gonna call the constructor of this element, of this object, of our element selection filter that has this one parameter. So before actually going here, it will see that we use this and it will go here. It will assign this validate element field to this value that we're passing here, and then it will go here and do this job. So this is what it will do. So use these overloads in these scenarios. And here I would like to use this overload, but here it's not going to be always used. So sometimes I want this to be true, and sometimes I want to actually use the validate reference and I want to pass like a reference. But sometimes that can be null. So what I could do is that I could go like this. If not reference, if this validate reference is null, gosh, is null, I want to do something, some like one thing. If not, just return like this method. But what I want to show you here, you can do this yourself, but I want to show you a cool thing. Actually, this method, it can be called not only this way, but also we could have called this like that, invoke. That is the same thing. This one is like the same as this one. So that is totally the same. So what we can do here is that we can check like that. That is the check. So here what we're doing is that we're telling if validate reference is not null, I want to invoke reference. And here we're going to use the null coalescing operator that looks like that, and we're going to say true. What it does, it actually, if, like the main idea of the null coalescing operator is that it returns the value of its left-hand operator if it isn't null. So if that part isn't null, it's going to return true. And that is actually what I want. If you want to read up about this like more, here I have like I opened up like this part and you can just go there and Google something like this. C# null coalescing operator. And here tons of examples and can read about this, and that is quite cool. So yeah, so we've done this portion, and now if I actually want to again go with the point on element, here as the second argument, I can actually say that my reference, uh, yeah, that my reference element reference type should equal to let's say, and tell that that should be like surface, for example. So now I'm going to be able to select a wall, and I'm only going to be able to select the faces of it, as you can see. So that is quite cool, right? So now it's extensible, but it's not always should be called. So what we want to do next, now I'm going to go a little bit faster because you're kind of familiar a bit with this. So we're going to create a linkable selection filter, right? So what I'm doing here is that Um, I'm gonna create two classes here, actually more, in one file. It's not something that you should do. I'm just doing this so you can see everything in one place. Eventually, I'm gonna refactor this. I'm gonna make it better. So public class linkable selection filter, and I wanna implement ISelectionFilter, implement missing members, so I'm gonna implement them. I also want to have like constructor that will have this validate element, right? And actually it will go and create something like this with linkable. And right off the bat, what I see before even continuing that I have two repetitions that are totally the same. So all my element filters that I eventually want to create, they should have this func with validate elements. So they should have this one and all of them. And I don't want to repeat myself each time. I don't want to have these tons of repetitions. So what I can do, I can create a base abstract class that will have a default implementation for this. Let's do this. So here what I can do is that I can go public abstract. Abstract is kind of similar to interface in terms of how that works, but it enables us to have implementation also. Let me show you. Public abstract class, and I'm gonna have like base uh, selection, base selection filter, base selection filter. I'm gonna implement ISelectionFilter, and what I want to do here is that I want to have this portion. So I'm gonna go like that. That is the portion. Of course, I should change the name for the constructor. Oops, I think I kind of like this. Okay, make sure that we select like this. Uh, this uh, accessor like should be protected because I want to abstract class cannot be instantiated on its own. Abstract class is just for us to inherit from this. So, and I'm also gonna copy this portion. Now I'm going to show you, actually right now, if you're not familiar with this, you need to understand what benefit it gives you and then learn more about this. These portions should be still implemented, not in this class, but in other classes. So I'm going to remove this and I'm going to say that that is an abstract class. And an abstract class means that the ones that are going to inherit this class should implement it. Actually, you can call it, when we use like interfaces, we're using the terminology like implement an interface, but here we can say like inherit, but actually, it also makes you like implement some stuff. So what do I mean? Let's kind of copy this part. I'm just going to show you how that works. So here we define the basic logic, and now I'm going to not implement ISelectionFilter, but I'm going to go implement BaseElementSelection. Not implement actually, but inherit. And then it prompts me that, you know what, you have two abstract classes, and these abstract classes they are your responsibility. You should tell what they should look like. And here it's gonna call something like this. Let's go to the next line. It's gonna grab the constructor from the preview from this class, and here actually it should be protected because we want to use from the derived classes. And you can hover over the name. You can go Control RR, double R, and here with ReSharper, you can actually rename this, and that will rename this not only here, but also here. Check this out. Here and here. Okay, next. Here and here. Why am I doing this? Because right now, what it does is that it goes to this class. So when you create an instance of this element selection filter, it goes like, oh, I have this, and I should call this from the base. And it goes to the base, and it runs this constructor, and that assigns this field, right? So now we have this field. So here, you already have this field. Like if I go like return, and you go validate element, you have it, right? And here, actually, you can create this overload that we kind of created. So now I can copy this, I can copy this. I can say that I want to go like comma, and I want to have this part where we have validate reference, right? Like this. Let's go to the new line. So like this, and maybe even like this. And I want to create also a read-only field. So this will be here. Let's drag it down so you can see this like that. And we're actually going to do this part like this, right? So now I'm going to remove what was before here. And what we do is that we now implement BaseElementSelection, and that is our abstract class. Abstract class, you cannot go there and create this abstract class. For example, you cannot go there var a quickly like new base. You don't have an option for this because abstract class cannot be instantiated. Abstract class is used for like here we have this implementation that already all classes have and we have abstract methods. And abstract methods means that when we inherit from this, we must implement them. Now I can go to this linkable part and I'm gonna, let's even delete all of this stuff for the time being, right? So I can go base selection filter and I'm gonna implement all missing members there. As you can see what it does the same job here and I'm okay with this. Also, I want to have here the document. So I want to pass a document there and I'm gonna explain to you why. So here I'm gonna, for the linkable part, I need to have the document and this validate element. And let's click and create a read-only field for the document, right? Why am I doing this? Because because what actually happens here is that now we're dealing with linked files. And again, let's talk about what is like what we're doing here. So reference is basically any kind of element uh, that that our element consists of. We can put it that way because again, our wall consists of points, of curves, and all of these are references of this element, right? So here, when we actually do this cross selection, right? When we do this cross selection, we will actually select the link, right? So what I want to do here is that I'm going to create a link. I want to check if that is a link. So here, for the time being, what I'm going to do for allow element, I'm always going to return true. And you will see why actually, right? And you will see why. Because here, what we're gonna do, here we're returning always true. Please bear with me if you're really kind of feeling that you cannot take anymore in terms of like a lot of information for you. Make sure to stop it. Make sure to check some videos about C Sharp. Again, I told you what kind of like delegates and all of this stuff, and come back and like go back watching this. So here now we're going to deal only with references, and I'm going to explain to you why. Just give me like a minute here. So what we're going to do there is that we want to check if the element we're working with is so I can go if I can click tab, so it's gonna create this part for me. And I can go and right now I can say if document get element of this reference, and our reference has the property element ID. So imagine what happens is that you select like this, and now let's say we select the link, right? So that is what we have selected. So this way we can actually understand that we have selected a link. So we are saying that if the element that we select is Revit link instance, let me again show you how you can analyze. So you need to select this element. You go to the Revit lookup and you go simply to the Snoop current selection. There we go, Revit link instance. You have it here. So that is a Revit link instance. So you can also go to documentation, read about this and all of this stuff. And what a lot of people do is that, and they will go like this, link instance, okay, actually, I'm gonna delete this right now. I know that I've misspelled this, and they would do something like this. But actually, that is a waste of time because what we can do, we can type like this, link instance. So if that is a Revit link instance, cast it right away to link instance. And if that is true, I want to return, like now what I can do is that I can have validate element. And what I want to pass here is that I want to pass like so we need to give an element here, right? So really think about, we need to give an element here, an element of what we've selected. So if you go to our link instance, we can get the link document, because always think about how we can get the element. For example, how we could possibly get the wall in this document where it's from the link. We need to actually get this element from the link because this is where it exists. So this is exactly what we do. We selected the Revit link instance. Revit link instance knows about its document, and from the document we can go and get element. And now we can say, give me reference linked element ID. Let's kind of think about again what happens here. Here we're going like doc from this is our current document. and from the current document we're getting element. We have a reference, and from the reference we're getting element ID. And in this case, that is just a link. And if that is a link, we're gonna create a link instance. We're gonna have this links instance. And link instance knows about its document. So it's like we're going, oh, that is a link. I should go to its document. And within this document, I can go get element. And we know this method get element on the document. But here, instead of doing like reference element ID, we can say reference linked element ID. So it will just give us the linked element. And that will be like our element. But here, what I can do right now, that let's kind of store this in a variable element. And I can, let's go to the next line, so maybe it's cleaner a bit. And I want to return this validate element like that. And now that is okay. If that is not a Revit link instance, I simply want to go return validate element, right? And I want to go like with the reference element ID. Actually, I should have go like this. Document. Yeah, let me kind of close it off. So I go with the document and oops, here I needed to go like this, get element. So I need to do something, give me a second, something like this. So basically, and here as you can see why the resharper is so cool, because what it does, it kind of says us that we should invert if statement. Let me show you what that means. What it does, it inverts what we did. We can even do this that way. So whenever you have huge like implementations, a lot of code, it's better to invert what you're writing. For example, here we have dog get elements and we check if that is a Revit link instance, right? But imagine if we didn't do this and we would have like a lot of code, like 20 lines of code, 25 line of code, 40 lines of code, which is not a good idea, but let's suppose that we have it. And let's say that some programmer comes to our code and check it out. He would need to go read all, but maybe it doesn't important for him to check the implementation where it's not a Revit link instance, right? So maybe he doesn't want to do this. So what we're doing here is that for the programmers, for the developers, so when some other people go and read your code, they will see, oh, if that is not a instance, it should just return this. And if they are interested in implementation of other thing, they will go here and read this part. We can go to the next line. So basically, how do we read this? If that is not a link instance, just return validate element of the element ID. If that is an instance, a Revit link instance, just validate element from the link. So that is exactly how that works. Why, and you may ask, why this allow element equals to true? Isn't that will allow us to kind of select any element? And you're right. But here, object type, that is something that is determining what we should select. So that is the enumeration that is responsible for this. So here we can say, I want to select only linked element. So that will kind of, it will, it's not going to worry about this thing right now, right? It's going to pick the it's going to worry about the reference and do all of this job. And actually, when you need to have just a simple true, you can use expression body members, something like this. It's kind of cleaner. So that is another way for you to use this. So now, if I have this part, I don't want to have like this reference right now. And I say if is wall, and now let's call linkable selection filter. But here I need to pass a document before that. I need to have one more. So I'm gonna build it. Now, if I run this, I can actually select elements from links, right? So that is kind of cool. So now what we have is that we have an option to select these um, kind of like elements from the link and sometimes not from the link. So that is kind of quite powerful thing to do. And what we actually want to do right now, like you can test it right now and do all of the job that is required for you, right, to play around with this. It's better that you stop at some point and play around. But now you may ask, how do we select elements from both linked document and current document? And it all depends on what objects we're gonna pick, on what object type we're gonna go with. So if you go here with point, oops, if you go here with point on element, basically right now it will allow you to kind of select it. So let's go there, and I'm gonna call this one part. So now, as you can see, you can select elements from link, and you can also select elements, select walls from like your main model, right? So from your current document. So isn't that cool that we're able to select them now from both documents? So it's kind of nice. So actually, this is the part where I think I would like to stop, and I'm going to continue in the next video explaining about how to actually get elements and how to have these options that I've shown you just at the beginning, right? So we can actually understand how everything works. Right now, for me, let's kind of it's crucially important to just go over and think about all the things that we went through so you can actually repeat them and learn them in a right way. So here again, what I did, what I purely did is that so here when you create a class, it kind of creates a file within CS extension. And here, as you can see, I have a lot of classes, which is not a good practice. Each class should be put in a different file. So it should have its own file. And we will do this right at the end. I just wanted to show you the way I go about solving problems. So first of all, I create something like this. But then I can actually use resharper. So I go like Alt Enter, and here I can use move class, actually not this one, like that. So move class to this file, and that will create this file. So it will be just like a couple of seconds for me to do this. But now let's go through all of them and kind of think about it. So the main question is that why we created this base selection filter class. It's because we have some common implementation that is repeated, and we don't want to violate dry. We don't want to violate dry. We want to be compliant to dry. And dry stands for don't repeat yourself. So whenever you find yourself in a situation that you're copy pasting or you see that you're kind of repeating the same code, think about doing something about this. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do this at all. Sometimes it's okay to do that, but make sure that you have a good reason to do that for. So here I knew that all my classes should have this type of constructor, should have this constructor with this argument. All my classes should have like this field, right? And all my classes should like they must implement two of these methods. So I put them in the abstract class. Abstract class, it's similar to interface in a sense of that we can leave the implementation for other classes. As you can see here, allow element has no implementation. It doesn't know what that method should do. But where we implement it, right, we can actually see this. Actually, with abstract classes, I think it's better to say inherit, right? Because we actually inherit from this class. But with interfaces, we implement them because interfaces has no implementation whatsoever. They're just telling us what they should look like. So here, this is the part where we store some repetitive code, and then we just and then we just inherit from them. Here, what we learned is that how powerful our delegates can be. So delegate is like a reference to a method. And here we have func, we have action, and we have predicate. What is the difference between them? It's not that complicated. It's just about what they're returning, what arguments you can pass. So here with func, you're determining what elements should be passed like to your method. So this is actually this func is the representation of this method. So as argument, we should have element, and as a return type, we should have a boolean, right? If you go to the documentation and try some examples, it will be really easier for you to get a full grasp on it. And here we just simply use these delegates. So we are the ones who are determining what elements should be selected. And eventually, even if you didn't have that code, right? Even if you can go inside this class and make a change, you are still the one who is determining this. Because if you're not doing this, you need to actually go to the class and make change here. And we don't want this because we violate the open closed principle, and that is related for solid principles. I think you need to check them out, but I'm gonna touch on them a lot. And that is the principle that says that our code should be open for implementation, our code should be open for extension, but closed for the modification. That is what you need to keep in mind of. Keep keep that in mind. So basically here we're just putting this delegate and calling this here. Also, we're having from reference, and reference, that is something that our element consists of, because element is just a geometry, and our geometry consists of points and all of this stuff. And you can actually try to create a dimension manually in Revit. You'll see that you can get the point of the element, get the edge of the element, and basically when the element will move, the dimension will move with this. And that is what the reference is all about. So here you kind of saw how we can use this this method of checking if the element is null. So if this one is not null, we invoke it. Invoke is doing like the same thing as this one. And here we're using like null coalescing operator. Then we have created a linkable selection filter, and we set here, we implement this base selection filter. And actually you may ask, but how we can pass it here when that way it's an ISelectionFilter, but we actually pass something that you may think that doesn't implement this, but actually it does, because this linkable selection filter is base selection filter. And base selection filter is actually ISelectionFilter. So that's how that works. And now we're saying that allow element should be always to true. And why we don't care about this? Because here we're saying that I want to select, for example, only linked element. And if that object type is set to linked element, you'll be able only to select links. And we are here determining what should happen. So here we're telling that if that is not a link, so we're getting the element from the document and we're checking if that is a Revit link instance. And if that is not here, as you can see here, we put this exclamation mark. And if that is, and that means not. If that is not link instance, Revit link instance, simply return validate element on this one, because it means that we just selected the element itself from the current document. But if it is a link instance, get the link document and just get element from the link. That's that's it actually. This is what you need to do. In the next video, I'm gonna show you how to select, how to create these methods that I've shown you in the at the beginning of the video, right? Where we can actually say that I want to select like these elements, and there I can retrieve them. I can actually have these elements and eventually I can do something with them. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching. Right, I think that's it for today. It's quite a lengthy video. So if you find the content useful, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. And again, thank you for watching and have a nice day.